I am very well. Thanks for having me on.
Well, thank you for being here, because let me start off with this, okay? I've got a little bit of a theory that I want to test the waters with you for, okay? Let me start off. Do you mind me asking how old a guy you are?
I am 13. No, I'm 35.
35. So you're a little bit older than myself. So when the Expos kind of were going through their, let's call them what they were, their glory years, which also unfortunately ended up being their swan song, you would have been probably around 13, 14 years old.
Yeah, I mean, 1994, I was 16. So,
right.
Yeah, pretty close. Exactly.
Okay. No, and just one of the things that I've been debating is whether or not we actually remembered the Montreal Expos as being far more exciting than they actually were, for lack of a better term. But that having been said, you're in the wheelhouse where you have a pretty good memory base of what they actually were. What were the Expos like back in the 90s?
Well, the Expos in the 1990s were competing with the Montreal Canadiens, and that's saying a lot because the 93 team in hockey won the Stanley Cup.
Right.
92 to 94 were generally regarded as just magical years. You had a young and up-and-coming team that was created in the farm system, managed by Philippe Alou, who was adored here in the province of Quebec. He ended up marrying somebody from here. So it was just a magical time with incredible players who, most of them after 94, when they were all jettisoned, went on to incredible success elsewhere.
I don't really recall, because I would have been in and around that time, but I mean, growing up in Toronto, you kind of focused mostly on the American League and didn't necessarily pay a whole lot of attention to the National League. I don't really recall the set of circumstances that led to what should have been a popular team not getting enough fan support to stay in Montreal.
Oh, boy. You're going to need more than 5 minutes here, but I'll give it a shot very, very quickly.
Oh, sure,
so,
yeah.
What I've said all along, and this is the number one question we're getting in light of all of the attention we've received the last few days, is trying to answer all of the critics. Oh, well, you had 1,000 in Toronto. That's how many guys were going to games in Montreal, right? Right. Ha, ha, ha. There were so many circumstances that dwindled the fan base's interest that by the end it was like watching a sick friend leave, and you couldn't go, and you couldn't go anymore.
Right.
And that's basically what happened. So 1994, best team in baseball. The strike hits, wipes out the rest of the season. What happens in the off-season? Management, which a few years earlier had sold out to a consortium. It was, of course, Charles Bronfman, who owned the team for many, many years. He gets out of baseball. Other companies get in, manage the Expos with not a lot of money to spare, so they get rid of the team after 94. 1995, they lose their cleanup hitter, they lose their starting pitcher, they lose their reliever, they lose their center fielder, they lose their right. I mean, it was a massacre. We believe 20 to 25% of the fan base never came back, saw the writing on the wall, didn't happen. 1997, Pedro Martinez, a beloved Expo, top 5 maybe of all time in terms of popularity, wins the Cy Young Award, first time in Expos history. Traded away because they can't afford them. Maybe another 5 or 10% of the fan base gets wiped out. Late 90s, early 2000s, they try and get a stadium done. The government at the time, not very big Expo fans, they nixed the deal when it was almost done. More fans stopped coming. Jeffrey Loria takes over the team. First thing he does, he takes the Expos off of English radio in Montreal because he doesn't like what's being offered to him. So Dave Van Horn, the esteemed Dave Van Horn, does the entire 2000 season on internet radio, if you can imagine, back in 2000.
Wow.
So, boom, more Expo fans leave. And then you throw in Major League Baseball trying to contract the team. That doesn't happen, so they end up owning them the last 3 years. Nobody wants to come at that point. So you can see the progression or the regression, as it were, of the fan base. I was a diehard fan back then. I didn't go to that many games the last few years. I watched them religiously, but you see the writing on the wall. It's very difficult to try and keep your heart in it, and that's exactly what happened in my estimation.
With Matthew Rassa, founder and chairman of ExposNation, and visit them online, ExposNation.com, and find out just how big this push is to bring baseball back to Montreal. Let me throw this out at you, okay, Matt? Mm-hmm. The chances of Montreal getting a team aren't fantastic, but they're not terrible either. You guys are making huge leaps and bounds by way of getting that conversation at least started in Montreal. But Montreal comes, and we know what the rebuilding process is like. You see that in Washington Nationals, for example. They had a lot of really, really bad years before they were any good. Miami Marlins have never been good ever since they joined the league. What happens if Montreal comes back with a team and they're still not good? Would they get fan support?
Well, it depends where they're playing. Obviously, a downtown stadium in Montreal, nobody, and I mean nobody, wants to be indoors in the summer. Winters are long enough. You got to be outdoors. It's got to be downtown. Instead of going to Crescent Street and sitting on a terrace, you go to an Expo game. It's that simple. Doesn't matter who's playing. Doesn't matter how well the team is doing. It's part of, it's just entrenched in the city. And I think in that respect, that's how it works. And unfortunately, the Expos were very close to getting something done. It didn't happen, and ultimately it was their downfall. I mean, the Olympic Stadium is a glorified ashtray with a roof. I mean, it is awful. It is in the East End. It's far away from a lot of the family-centric places in the Montreal area. There's no nightlife around it. It's a terrible place to watch anything. You don't even see concerts being shown there anymore. You2 built a stadium for 2 days outdoors. I mean, you know where I'm going.
Yeah, I hear you. With Matthew Ross, founder, chairman of ExposNation, ExposNation.com. How close is this? And the reason I'm happy to ask this question is because last year I spoke with Jim Fanning, just as you guys were starting to really kind of get some speed, and Jim Fanning said, no, it's the momentum is building. We're now a year into this. The momentum certainly is building, but let's put this into reality. How far away is a team in Montreal from being a reality?
A lot of factors. The Montreal Baseball Project, which is heading the organizational and financial side of things, headed by former Expo Warren Cromartie, has made some huge strides. They're in the middle of a feasibility study with the Montreal Chamber of Commerce. And, our organization is basically grassroots, showing the fan support. We're here to support people like Warren Cromartie. But Mr. Fanning, God love him, is absolutely right. Things are progressing. There's a long, rich tradition and history here. And if I could just for a second say something about Jim Fanning from this past weekend. He showed up to sit with the fans. Let me tell you, 86 years old, separated his shoulder or some sort of shoulder injury on his way to the game, didn't make it out of sick bay or the nursing station at the Blue Jays game. We heard he was going to come and visit the section in a wheelchair. No, not Jim Fanning. Came jogging in a sling down the rotunda, coming to see the fans. Somebody hands him something to sign in his sling with his right arm. He signs it.
No,
I mean, just an amazing fellow.
Wow. No, and we see him at our events. He lives in London now, and we see him at different events. Nobody supports baseball in the community level, in the major league level, in general, more than Jim Fanning. And I agree with you. If you guys can hold on to him as a spokesperson, this is closer and closer to a reality. Listen, Matthew, in all honesty, I missed the Montreal Expos while they were there. And the reason for that being, like I said, in Toronto, at the time, you were so focused at here's what Toronto's doing. We didn't necessarily see what was happening just down the road. So I hope that very, very soon I'll be able to say, I like the Toronto Blue Jays, and if they're having a down year, I like the Montreal Expos.
That's nice of you to hear, and nice to hear, I should say. And fortunately, we have some momentum. We're working on a couple of Montreal events, and hopefully it'll help the momentum. All
right, looking forward to it. And again, everybody, check out the website and to find out how you can help out, ExposNation.com. Matthew, thank you so much for this.